The Metropolitan Police have revealed that in a 6-week period, Just Stop Oil protests across London cost the force a whopping £4.5 million.
Yep, the police say that more than 13,000 officer shifts have been spent just on dealing with these slow march demonstrations. So the question this morning is it time to start making Just Stop Oil pay for their policing?
Joining us now, Dale Vince, who has donated to Just Stop Oil and even took part in a protest last week, and former police officer and terrorism expert Chris Phillips. Good morning to both of you.
Good morning.
Right, Dale Vince, how much have you donated to Just Stop Oil?
I think it's probably somewhere around £200,000 now, because we had a big fundraise last week off the back of a Daily Mail front page. We had a 48-hour fundraise that brought in £340,000 for them, actually.
Right. Given that the taxpayer has...
and I matched it, so I paid half of that. OK.
Given that the taxpayer has, with no choice in the matter, paid £4.5 million to police these slow marches, do you think it is time for the group Just Stop Oil to start paying for the policing themselves?
Well, no, I don't think it's a good idea at all. I think effectively that would shut down protesting in our country. Protesting should be a democratic right. You have to ask yourself, if we weren't allowed to protest because we had to pay the bill, we might as well be living in Russia or China or North Korea, because they don't allow protests there either. I don't think it's a very sensible idea. But in terms of the taxpayer having no choice, bear in mind the Queen's funeral cost the taxpayer in policing £70 million. The King's coronation, £200 million. We have no choice in that. Drilling in the North Sea, we have had no choice in that. Rishi Sunak has not been elected Prime Minister. He has no mandate from us for anything. And we give £10 billion to the fossil fuel industry every year in subsidies. So £4 million for people to protest about fossil fuels, which are causing so much harm in the world and in our country, I don't think is out of proportion.
Chris Phillips, why should Dale and his fellow protesters foot the bill for a democratic protest?
Well, the key thing is that people protest every week in London and most of our major cities without that kind of cost being involved. This is a cost that's been decided by one or two or 4 or 5 different people deciding to go off and do something illegal, and this is illegal activities. Listen, I go back to the days of Greenham Common. There are always single-issue groups out there that want to cause havoc to society. This is just another one of those. And the number of man and woman hours that's being used to police this is just quite incredible. And someone's got to foot that bill, and maybe those people that are involved in making those decisions should do that.
Well, let's go back to Dale Vince on that point then. Dale, I mean, what he's basically saying is there's no problem with the protest in itself. There's nothing to stop these people from Just Stop Oil gathering, say, outside number 10 Downing Street or outside Downing Street in the gates, waving their banners and making their protests and shouting through megaphones. But actually, the slow walk, which is basically halting city traffic, is what's costing all the money.
Yeah, OK, I hear that. But look, as I've said before, the taxpayer has no choice in so many things. The $10 billion that we give to the fossil fuel industry. The UN says that 4 million people have died globally already from the climate crisis. This is what Just Stop Oil are protesting about. In Europe last summer, 40,000 people died from excess heat. We're experiencing that again right now in Europe. That's due to the climate crisis driven by fossil fuels. If these 2 new oil fields in the North Sea go ahead, they will double our carbon budget in the next 10 years. We will shoot our carbon budget completely out of the water. Rishi Sunak has no mandate to do this, and millions of people in our country care very passionately about it, and they feel frustrated, so they take to the streets and they do this. That cost, £4 million, is tiny compared to all the other costs I've mentioned to you. DEFRA, they estimate that the cost to our economy of air pollution from burning fossil fuels is £10 billion a year.
Do you think that the problem for Just Stop Oil might be this, that many, many people listening to you speaking this morning will agree with virtually everything that you said, but they don't agree with the tactics that are being used? They feel that the tactics that are being used are so disruptive that they're actually counterproductive and they're not helping the argument.
Yeah, I hear this all the time, but I only hear it from journalists. Right, I don't hear it from members of the public. I mean, definitely there are some people agitated by it. I was on a march last week and I did see some of that. But, you know, for every person that was aggravated, there was another person shouting support at us. And I think that it's become a media myth that actually these tactics are counterproductive. It's just something the media keeps repeating amongst itself now. If you go out into the country, it's very different. 70% of people in our country want the government to reduce carbon emissions, not increase them.
Well, I could read you the messages we've had from viewers who are actually saying on their own behalf, and they're not members of the media, what I just put to you as an open question. But if we just go back to Chris Phillips, you said that you said that they're breaking the law. They say that they're not. They say that these slow marches down London streets and other streets are actually within the letter of the law.
Oh, and this is one of the big issues for policing is that the legislation has not been clear and is now becoming much more clear. I think the key thing is, you know, there's the cost of this is not just in the amount of police officers being used, but the fact that those police officers would have been doing other things, such as, you know, not only patrolling our streets and reassurance, but actually solving crimes. And that's not happening because of the actions of these small number of people. And you do need a lot of police officers to deal with this kind of protest. It's not something that you can just do with one or two officers.
Chris Phillips, thanks very much indeed. Dale, you said that for everybody who complained, there was someone who supported. Just to point out, we did do a Twitter poll on this. Should we make Just Stop Oil pay for policing? And almost 80% of people who responded said yes. So actually, a number of, you know, a huge proportion of those people who voted in that particular poll think you should put your hand in your pocket and pay for the policing. Just want to ask, you have donated 1.5 million to the Labour Party, haven't you? What would you hope to get in payment for your donation?
That's a short answer. Before I get to that, let me say this. Your Twitter poll is not statistically representative. You have to do a proper poll if you want to know what people in our country really think.
I appreciate it, but it is statistically representative of those people who responded to that Twitter poll.
It's a straw in the wind, isn't it?
But anyway, the 1.5 million donation to Labour, what would you hope would be the outcome of that?
Yeah. It's a simple answer. The answer is nothing. Other than, I hope that I will help Labour to win the next election, because there's always a funding gap between Labour and the Tories. The Tories spend as much as everybody else put together in every election. So I'm hoping to help them win the next election, because it's the most important thing that can happen in our country right now.
OK, well, thank you both very much indeed for your time this morning. A stimulating exchange of views. Thank you.
8:36, returning to our breaking news this morning.